If you saw an elderly veteran step into a courtroom for nothing more than a parking violation, what would you think? A misunderstanding? A trivial matter? But if he carried with him an old wooden box, clutching it as though it contained his entire life, would you pause to ask why? John Evers didn't come to court to argue. He came to keep a promise. And what happened next made a Navy SEAL rise to his feet. When the courtroom fell silent, you understood. Sometimes respect isn't written in law, but etched in memory. Watch through to the end of this story, for there are moments so small, they can bring an entire town to its knees. John Evers lived alone on the outskirts of Nashville. He was 73, a veteran who had lost friends and survived untold horrors. In his modest little house, nothing was new. The scent of burnt coffee mingled with the tang of old engine oil, much like John himself. Thin, quiet, no longer concerned with things beyond his reach. He measured time not by calendars, but by the silent days that passed without someone calling his name. One morning, he found a plain white envelope at his door. Nothing ceremonial, yet the neat, clinical typeface sent a hollow ache through his chest. It was from the Montgomery County Court. He knew this kind of mail. It never brought good news. His eyes settled on the summary line, parking violation, in the redevelopment zone. John sank into his chair, envelope in hand, unopened. He didn't need to read it to know the location. That lot had once been a memorial park, a simple lawn with stone benches and an aging bronze plaque bearing the names of soldiers who never returned. He and 3 comrades had pooled their money to erect it. They had little else, but they had memories, loyalty, and the promise that those names would not be forgotten. He remembered his last visit there, grass brown, plaque tarnished, but he still saw Eddie's face, Bill's smile, and his younger self standing watch. Now the site was fenced off, slated for new apartments. No parking signs surrounded it. Yet he had parked there deliberately, not by accident, but because he needed to stand once more where his friends had fallen. Just one final time. There was nothing heroic in that act, just an old man standing in the dirt amid jackhammers and concrete. But to him, it was sacred ground. And he knew that the moment his car stopped against the fence, he had broken the law. He accepted it. He offered no excuse. What stung more than the citation was the court summons itself, proof that they had forgotten what that place once was. And that hurt more than any fine. John laid the envelope on the table and sat motionless for a long while. Then, as if compelled by something in his heart, he rose and walked to the shabby cabinet in the corner. Inside lay a dusty wooden box, untouched for years. He did not open it. He only stroked its lid. Within were his silver star, a frayed American flag, and a black and white photograph of 5 young soldiers, 3 of whom would never return from overseas. He remembered every face, their last conversation, the barracks jokes before the guns roared. In those silent moments, he knew none of them had the chance to come home, to grow old, to receive a letter like the one he held. So standing at their memorial, even in defiance of the law, was the silent fulfillment of a promise. John did not need anyone to understand. He did not expect sympathy. But if he had to appear in court, he would go, and he would bring that wooden box, not to beg, nor to prove anything, but to show, even for an instant, that some acts belong not to statutes, but to memory, and that those who have passed on still deserve to stand where they once gave everything. A court summons can be a punishment, or it can be a reminder. To John, it was both, but more importantly, it summoned what lay beneath, and he chose to carry that with him. Back in the kitchen, where the scent of cold coffee still lingered. John folded the envelope and placed it on the worn tablecloth. His hands trembled slightly, not from age but from something deeper, a memory rekindled, quiet, yet never to be lost. Are you still here? Thank you. If you find value in what you've heard, please leave a like and subscribe, and join me on this journey. The next morning, John woke early as usual. Everything in the kitchen unfolded to a familiar rhythm. The kettle set atop the old gas stove, the coffee mug left unwashed, merely rinsed, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. But today, he did not reach for the coffee. His gaze remained fixed on the plain white envelope resting silently on the table, as if it might speak on its own. It did nothing, yet consumed his every thought. A soft knock sounded. Without looking, he knew who it was. Carly, the only neighbor whose concern extended beyond polite civility. She carried a warm corn muffin, wrapped in a dark cloth. Her hand rested lightly on the doorknob, and without waiting for permission, she entered with a familiarity that had long been established. No one spoke at first. She set the muffin on the table. Her eyes swept over the envelope. No question was needed to know what it was, no words to understand why John sat motionless, one hand propped on his knee as if holding something back. She pulled out a chair opposite him. Her gaze met his, but without judgment, simply a quiet weighing between what to say and what to hold back. John reached for the kettle and poured coffee into 2 chipped porcelain cups. His movements were deliberate, steady. The silence was unforced. It felt like part of a language shared by 2 people who had endured too much loss to need explanation. Finally she spoke, not exactly a question, but an offering of companionship. I heard about the letter. He nodded, neither surprised nor evasive. His eyes remained on the cup in his hand. Her next words came softly. Are you going? He took a slow breath. He raised his eyes, not to her, but through the room to somewhere beyond. I know I was wrong, he said, his voice low, dry yet clear. But sometimes there are things worth admitting before the penalty comes. Carly did not reply immediately. Her hand traced the rim of her mug, her gaze settling on the wooden box that lay in the cabinet behind him. She had seen it before, never asked, but today it felt integral to the unspoken conversation. She looked at him long, as if measuring the depth of a decision he had yet to name. Take that box with you, she finally said, her voice a whisper, so they understand why you parked there. There was no immediate reaction, no nod, no refusal, but something shifted. A long exhale, a slow glance toward the box. In that moment, no more words were necessary. Carly knew he would go, and John knew it was not to win, nor to plead innocence, but to say aloud something no one else remembered to say. The muffin sat warm on the table. The coffee cooled in the cups, yet their presence in that worn kitchen felt warmer than anything else. Between them lay not a debate over law, but a story of memory, something that, at times, needs only a shared glance, a timely word, to remind us that some things are worth preserving, and that sometimes someone must stand up simply to say in silence that they still matter. The morning at Montgomery County Court began as usual, dull, filled with trivial matters. Those summoned sat scattered, quietly scrolling phones or checking watches. No one paid attention to the elderly man in a gray coat, seated in the back row. He cradled a wooden box, carefully wrapped in an old handkerchief, its fabric worn and pattern faded with time. He did not look around, nor did he fidget. He simply sat, silently, as if time no longer affected him. John Evers had prepared for this moment the night before, not with excuses, but with something he felt compelled to do. Not to evade punishment, nor to gain sympathy. He only wanted them to see. His name was called. No surprised glances. Just a name among hundreds on today's docket. John Evers, case number 2187, parking violation. He rose, his movement slow but without hesitation, his worn shoes whispering against the floor. As he walked forward, a few heads turned, not recognizing him, but curious about the box in his arms, something out of place amid the rustle of papers and staccato typing. The presiding judge that day was Judge Rosemary Cline, known for her seriousness, her economy of words, her unwavering regard for procedure. She peered over silver-rimmed glasses, her tone devoid of emotion. "Mr. Evers, you parked in a restricted redevelopment zone. Are you aware access to that area is prohibited?" John nodded. No excuse, no blame shifting. He simply spoke, slowly, loud enough for the room to fall silent and listen. "I know, but that's where my friend fell. They're tearing it down. I just wanted to stand there one last time." An extraordinary hush descended, not from shock, but because those words carried no melodrama, yet were so weighty that every other sound seemed superfluous. John placed the wooden box on the table before him. No one told him to, yet every gaze shifted to it immediately. He opened the lid. Inside lay a silver star, its bronze rim tarnished yet still regal, and beside it a black and white photograph of 5 young men in uniform, faces bold, stubborn, so vivid they might step from the frame. 3 of them had paid the ultimate price. One was Tom Branson's father. John offered no further explanation. He need not recount shared rations, the cramped barracks, or the near misses in battle. He need not speak of artillery fire, tropical downpours, or the agony of leaving a fallen comrade behind. He knew some truths are understood in silence. In a chamber meant for paperwork and legal precedents, something unrecorded had emerged, the living presence of memory. It was neither loud nor violent, yet it compelled everyone to sit up straight, to pause, to listen, even though nothing more was said. Judge Cline gazed at the photograph. Her expression remained composed, yet her eyes shifted from her documents and lingered longer than protocol allowed. No one laughed, no one sneered, and John did not seek pity. He simply stood there, arms at his sides, as if he too belonged to that past sealed within the box. The hearing did not end immediately, but all that truly mattered had happened in that moment. An old man opened a box, a personal history laid bare in the light, and, for a fleeting second, everyone understood. Some things, whether minor infractions or rigid rules, are never greater than a promise kept for a lifetime. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or sip some water before the next surprising turn in this story, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see viewers joining us from around the world. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story, so we can continue bringing you more compelling tales. While the air in the courtroom still thrummed like a taut string, and no one had yet decided how to react to the wooden box lying open on the table, a subtle sound came from the back, wooden chair legs scraping the floor. A man rose to his feet. No one called him. No one invited him. But his very stance was enough to halt every motion. He wore no uniform, yet his worn leather jacket, the small insignia on his lapel, and the way he stepped forward, deliberate, unhesitating, spoke volumes. Tom Branson. A name unknown in that room until he spoke, his voice rough yet resolute. I am the son of the man standing beside him in that photograph. His eyes never left John's, not for a single heartbeat. Those words made the courtroom still as stone. Those about to glance at phones or lean to whisper turned rigidly silent. No typing, no clearing of throats, only Tom's voice, clear, measured, each syllable echoing. My father rarely spoke of the war. Perhaps he thought we wouldn't understand. Perhaps he didn't want to reopen old wounds. But there was one story he told, repeatedly, about a man. Tom's tone slowed, as though he were treading footprints of memories not his own, but another's. Memories passed on not through images, but through the look his father wore, sitting wordless on the porch. He would say, there was a man who pulled him from the fire at Pleiku, not because it was his duty, not because he was ordered to, but simply because he refused to let anyone be left behind. Each word fell like a fragment of a long-buried truth. John remained motionless, yet his eyes had shifted, not tearful, not trembling, only a faint glow from a place very distant, very old, now flickering back to life. Tom swept his gaze across the room, studying every face frozen between justice and feeling. He spoke slowly, but with the force of a man at the front line. If I could stand in the line of fire for my comrade, then I can stand here in this courtroom and say, respect does not always reside in the law. Sometimes it lives in memory. No one applauded. No one needed to. What had unfolded was not a speech, but a truth spoken at the right moment, to the right people, in the right place. Tom's eyes left the crowd and the wooden box to settle on John. There was no pity, no tragedy, only a passing of the torch from one generation to the next, from the soldier of yesteryear to the son raised on stories no one else had heard. In that instant, John was no longer the defendant, and Tom was no mere witness. Both were bearers of memory, each in his own way. One holding silence for decades, the other wielding words to stand when it mattered most. The atmosphere had transformed. Those who had earlier dared to snicker now sat mute, not from compulsion, but from something deeper. A respect unbidden, a thing unspoken, yet universally felt. Tom did not linger. He said what needed saying, then stepped back, without turning away, but so as not to eclipse the elderly man before the bench, the man who once carried another on his back and now carried a truth the entire courtroom needed to remember. Judge Klein said nothing at first. She quietly lifted the file, flipping through its pages with fingertips accustomed to dispensing justice as naturally as breathing. Her eyes slowly reread the transcripts, though she already knew them by heart. She did not need more information. She only needed time for everything to settle, and for the courtroom to truly feel the weight of what had just occurred. In the file, the offense was clear: parking in a prohibited zone. The no parking signs were real, yet the photos taken by the construction crew showed no pedestrians, no obstruction of work, no one affected. Legally, it was a minor infraction. Morally, it was quite another matter. She set the file down, hands clasped before her. Her gaze no longer scrutinized but softened, as though looking straight through John, not to judge, but to understand. She inhaled deeply, then spoke, measured yet, with an unusual slowness. Mr. Evers, she began, your action was a violation, but it caused no disturbance, no damage, and it clearly did not stem from personal gain or defiance. The courtroom fell utterly silent. No rustle of paper, no scrape of chair legs. Only the voice of a woman who was no longer mere judge, but witness to something that paperwork alone could never reach. The court acknowledges your motivation and the context, she paused, and in respect for what you and the witness's father have done. She paused again briefly. The court hereby dismisses the penalty. No one applauded. No one cheered. Yet in that moment, the entire room seemed to exhale a long-held breath, clear, without triumph, just recognition, a silent accord that needed no words. Tom Branson, seated near the end of the benches, raised his hand in salute. The gesture crisp, precise, an unspoken ritual, neither ostentatious nor explained. John returned the salute, more slowly, but with equal certainty. His shoulders straightened, his hand lifted, not to display a decoration, but to reaffirm a promise kept across a lifetime. In their eyes, there was no trophy, only memory. A fragment of war and its aftermath had been healed by a nod, a salute, and a silence shared by all present. No tragedy played out, no tears were necessary. John did not bow in thanks. He only inclined his head slightly, as an old soldier does upon receiving orders. No need for witnesses, no need for accolades. What he needed was the knowledge that he had come, that he had stood, however late, and that memory, however fragile, could be preserved by the quiet presence of one man. His arm dropped, meeting Tom's at the same moment. 2 generations, one who once rescued, the other raised on that rescued memory, stood in a room meant for laws. And today that room had borne witness to something different. Some trials require no verdict to leave their mark, only a wooden box, a photograph, a story profound enough, and one person brave enough to stand at just the right moment, simply to say that it still matters. A week after the hearing, when the clamor had finally quieted, a new wooden bench appeared in a small corner of Oak Hill Park, once forgotten. There was no ribbon cutting, no news crews, no speeches, only a small plaque inscribed, "For those who carried a town's memory on their shoulders." John Evers arrived early. He told no one and gave no notice. Cradling the wooden box, he walked slowly to the bench. Each step seemed to carry him back to another time, to some dusty fragment of the past. He sat down in silence, the box resting on his lap, his hands wrapped around it, as if embracing something unseen, not a thing, but a piece of a person. Carly stood a few paces away, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She said nothing. She simply stood, quietly, as she once had in that little kitchen, allowing John to speak the truths he needed to voice. For in some moments, presence alone is enough. Words are unnecessary. Then Tom Branson arrived. He wore his old SEAL uniform, one he had not donned in years, but today it mattered. It was a reminder, a way of saying, "I remember." His gaze swept over the old man on the bench, then paused on the bronze plaque. No grand display, no flourish. Soon, a group of elementary students from the nearby school approached in silence. They did not know the full story, but their teacher had explained today was for remembrance. Each child carried a small American flag, and one by one planted them in the grass around the bench. No one told them to stand solemnly, yet none whispered, for though they did not grasp every detail, they sensed something special unfolding. The mayor came, too, with no hat, no microphone, no prepared remarks. He walked up, nodded to John, then stood beside Tom. After a moment, he bowed his head. not out of obligation, but because this town, in its own way, had chosen silence as its deepest tribute. John remained seated. The breeze tousled his silver hair. He opened the wooden box one final time that day, not to show, not to recount, but to ensure everything was intact. The metal lay quiet beside the old photograph. All had seen them in court. But today, only he beheld them, with eyes that had witnessed too many farewells, and a heart that had buried a promise for over half a century. He did not expect to cry, and he did not, but his eyes glistened, as if memories were flooding back, each face, each laugh, each retreat into darkness, especially the moment he turned back when he could have fled, the moment he chose to carry another life, for no glory, but because he could not bear to return alone. The ceremony ended without fanfare. No one pronounced a conclusion, but people lingered. They did not leave at once. They simply stood in small clusters or alone, gazing at the wooden bench. The air was charged with something settled into its rightful place at precisely the right time. John rose, still clutching the wooden box. He spoke no words, but as he passed Tom, he paused and inclined his head deeply. Tom returned the military salute as in court, but this time, John did not salute back. He placed his hand over his heart and squeezed gently, as though holding fast to something that must never leave. John Evers's story does not appear in textbooks. It won't headline major memorials. But that day, the entire town learned. Some laws must be understood with the heart. And sometimes, a silent metal speaks more powerfully than any verdict. This story is not about a misdeed. It's about what we choose to preserve, in memory, in action, and in how we honor the past. If this tale moved you, please subscribe and share with your loved ones in the United States, for somewhere among them, someone may be holding a wooden box like John, quiet, yet profoundly meaningful.